What? There's a Mau Mau here. Hey, baby. Oh, you guys can see her. Mau Mau. There's her tail. There's a little lion's tail. Hi. And Chris is in the window now. Vlog cats. Hi, cuties. Please don't comment on my sunburn. I know I am sunburnt. It is not news to me. Thank you. That's your PSA for today. So as I pet this cat that's right next to me that you can only see her whipping tail, we're going to talk about books because I can't stop talking about books. Hey, it's my new theme song. You guys like it? In the month of August, it was deemed my classics month, and I would read classics and classics retellings and whatever the heck else because Libby drops things that I've had on hold for a while. So there's a few non-related classics at all. There's some more historical fiction, I'll say, is a little bit closer to it, I guess. But if you guys remember my TBR, I almost read everything. I was very close. The only 3 books I did not get, and I'm sorry if the camera shifts a lot, mouse keeps rubbing up against the tripod. I did not get to Prom and Prejudice by Elizabeth Eulberg, Northanger Abbey by Val McDermid, or The Arabian Nights, but there is a buzzword-a-thon coming up in September where the word is night, and I will be able to get to this then. So not completely lost, just not completely on time for Arabian Nights, but I tried my best. I'm going to divide this up a little bit differently than I normally do, where I just go through them as I've read them. I have divvied my books up into piles of books that were decent. We have our classics pile because I'm just going to review each classic, and then we have my absolutes, like 5 stars, very high rating books that just blew me out of the water, and the books that really disappointed the hell out of me. We're just gonna start with the classics since this was Classics Month. And as you guys already probably saw, if you didn't, go check it out. But my Pride and Prejudice day of reading, I read this in one day. I did a whole reading vlog for it, so you can check that out. See a little bit more of my inside reactions to finally reading Pride and Prejudice, but it is no surprise that I absolutely loved it. I love Pride and Prejudice. I love the humor in this. I love the romance and the drama. Mrs. Bennet is like my dream. Also, Kathryn de Bourgh is my dream role. I would love to be in a play version of Pride and Prejudice so bad. I love Pride and Prejudice. No surprise there. 5-star read. The next classic that I read was Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. I'm sorry to say, I am not a fan of Jane Eyre. There's a lot of good prose in it, so I can appreciate for that. I just don't particularly like the character of Jane Eyre. I think she's kind of dumb. And the fact that, you know, she falls in love with a guy who's literally like twice her age, which I don't care when people say, oh, it was the time period. I don't care because multiple people in this book remark on that age gap. So it's not so common, and it's everybody else is weirded out by it. I kind of hate the fact that what I would prefer for Jane Eyre's ending is for her to really take on her independence, because I don't want to spoil it, but can you spoil a classic, but with her cousins and her one cousin they're not actually related, or they are related, that I can't quite remember now, but like wants to marry her and take her to India, right? Wait, I forget where he wants to take her. I think it's India. And she's like, no, I'm not going to go unless I'm just going as, you know, your cousin or your sister. I'm not going as your wife. And that would have been cool if he had respected that. But the men in this story just kind of suck. And Rochester is the worst. And I hate him. And he's like this little sullen boy who needs a manic pixie dream girl to fix him. Even though Jane Eyre isn't really a manic pixie dream girl. She's just a cute girl living in his house. I just didn't like it. I'm not a huge fan of the actual story. Prose, very nice. Many quotable moments that everybody quotes. But as a whole, I'm not a fan. I'm sorry. Another disappointing classics read. I actually think I didn't enjoy Classics Month as much as I hoped I would, but I read Persuasion by Jane Austen, and I thought I was gonna decently like it, but I don't. The thing with Anne is that, again, she's not that bright. You know, the whole thing is about like how letting people persuade you, and there's a lot of different ways of persuasion that happens, hence the name. But I didn't like Captain Wentworth is also kind of horrible, and I didn't really feel their romance. I didn't feel the pining between them. They were just kind of both there and existing in each other's worlds, but the revelation that happens, I didn't feel anything from it. And I don't know if this was just because this is one of her later works and she wanted to focus more on family drama and less so the romance and more on the theme of letting other people kind of dictate your life. But I didn't feel that actual romance that Jane Austen is known for. So I was just kind of disappointed with Persuasion because I've seen a lot of adaptations of it and I've seen some good movie versions, and the movie versions I enjoy because you can see the pining that happens, but I don't really get that on the page. So this was my disappointing Jane Austen read. A not disappointing Jane Austen read is Northanger Abbey. So I really enjoy Northanger Abbey, and I know for a lot of people it's not their favorite because our lovely main character is not so bright as well, but it's in a very endearing way where she's like me and just gets swept up in books a lot. And she's very annoyed with people. Like, so with the frickin' Thorpes and stuff, they're the worst, and you know they're the worst, and you get so frustrated along with her because they're manipulating her and they're doing things without her consent, and it's very frustrating. And I feel that so much. I relate so hard to her, and I freaking love Henry Tilney. Okay, guys, Henry Tilney, and don't tell Pride and Prejudice, but Henry Tilney is my favorite male protagonist, is my favorite love interest. Don't tell Darcy, okay? I do love you, Darcy, but Henry Tilney is endearing and charming and so funny from the very beginning, and that doesn't really change for him. That he's like, if these guys were all real and I could pick which one to be my love interest, I would pick Henry Tilney, okay? Shh, don't tell him. So in the audiobook version, it also had her history of England. And it's a satire on the history of England that they would study in school. And so you can see from a very young age, because she wrote it when she was like 15, from that young age, you could see how rebellious she was in kind of changing how the people see the history of England. So she was so aware, and like for her time, she was woke, okay? Like Jane Austen was not playing. You see a lot of her, slighting against like slavery and stuff, her anger towards it. You'll see that in like Mansfield Park. That's a big part of it. And you see it as well in a few other books, I think. Who else does I know Mansfield Park is just the big one where she definitely comments on slavery. I guess Sanditon as well. You see the beginning of that with Sanditon and having more POC characters. So she was really ahead of her time with these books, even with something as when she wrote it as young as History of England, and definitely appreciated this one a lot. The final classic I got to but was sorely disappointed in was Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux. And Phantom of the Opera, okay, I've been in the musical. I love the musical. This is very different from the musical. The main reason is you can see where Andrew Lloyd Webber pulled his plot. However, the main character of this book is Raoul. And I don't know how I feel about that. Actually, I do. I don't like it. And the managers as well. Christine is never a POV. It's always her telling Raoul what happened with the Angel of Music, with Eric, with the Phantom. Those are all his titles, by the way. Raoul is kind of a creepy stalker. Like, you don't realize how creepy he is until he reunites with Christine. And the thing is, the musical makes it seem like they were really good childhood friends. They met like once. And he's been pining after her that whole time. Like, excuse you? Pacing of this book is very strange. There's a lot of POVs that I don't like. I'm kind of mad that Andrew Lloyd Webber didn't include the Persian, though, because his side of the story is very interesting, and I liked his narrative of it. But Christine is not the forefront of the story, and just the way that the logic works in it, the way that the interactions happen, I don't like it. And I honestly think if this was published today, it wouldn't get published because it's kind of poorly written. just with, like, in a sense of, like, narrative, it's not great. And also, everyone sucks. Why does everyone suck? And Carlotta's not even that big a character, and I was really offended by that because that's my character. Gah, very annoyed by that. Anyway, so that's all the classics that I read this month. I think we'll go on to talking about, let's talk about some mediocre books. Not mediocre, but like, I didn't hate them, but they're not like blowing my mind. So I read The 10th Kingdom, and I love this story so much. I repaired my book, by the way. It's not falling apart anymore. Again, if you don't know what The 10th Kingdom is, it was a mega series. It was a 5-day event, 2 hours each night on, was it NBC? Yes, it was NBC. It was the NBC television event of the year in 1999. And it's just all these fairy tales roped in together, and it's great and fun. They made changes in here that I'm like, why did you do that? It's weird. You know how people get argue about like when books become movies and they don't include certain things or they change certain things? There's no real reason to do that from movie into book. So they changed a lot. They changed some characters. They changed some larger plot points and stuff. Granted, they gave us a little more insight into some other kind of plot holes that happened in the show, but why did you change that? Like, why did we have to change Acorn from being the fake Swamp Wish to Clayface the Goblin? Because Clayface the Goblin does not appear in the rest of the show. Granted, if you have Warwick Davis at your disposal, then you're gonna use him as much as possible. I get that. In the book, there's no reason to, because like you literally have a script and you can just copy paste, you know? You can just make it in there, add a little bit of, you know, narration and a little bit more scenic descriptors, a little bit more internal thought processes, and then there's your book. Why did any of it have to change? Especially if you were gonna make it that thick, it's a big series, why did you change any of it? I didn't understand that. So it was still fun to read and jump back into the world. I definitely rewatched it after this because I love it so much. It's a great show, but why? Next up, we've got Jane Steele by Lindsay Faye. This is a Jane Eyre retelling where it's pitched as that Jane Eyre gets a dose of Dexter. So you're thinking that Jane Eyre is a serial killer. And serial killer implies full intent and pre-planning and having a kind of, well, she kind of has a pattern, but it's not really that. It's more Jane Eyre defending herself and weaker women and taking charge in that by killing the asshole men in her life. The first half is very good. The second half is more focused on the romance of Rochester, and it's okay. I think I like Rochester more in this one because we do have a little bit more, not a little bit, a lot more of a diverse cast, because in this version of it, Rochester is, his name is Thornfield, I'm sorry. The other thing about this is that it's not a full Jane Eyre retelling because the main character knows Jane Eyre, the book, and kind of compares herself through it all the time. Thornfield, he was in like the West Indies and stuff, and he brought back a lot of people from it. So you have his ward, who is actually a Sikh princess. She's not, well, all girls in the Sikh are princesses, and it's kind of like that thing. And you have all these other characters and some other twists that happen there. There's no, you know, crazy wife in the attic, so that's nice. But there's a lot of different things that happen with the story because of it, so it takes its own turn, and that's why I think I like it. I mean, I definitely liked it better than the original Jane Eyre. I do still wish it was Jane Eyre being more so of a villain than being this kind of vigilante, which is fun, but I kind of was hoping she was going to kill Thornfield, but that would have been great in the original. Thornfield himself, not that bad. Still creepy age gap. Next up is actually the first book that I read this month, and it was one that I had been waiting for on my queue. I actually picked this book back in January because I'm trying to finish reading all the books that I said I would read in other months as well the rest of this year, and there's a lot. But that's Strange Grace by Tessa Gratton. I didn't know what I expected with this book, but I did not expect this. So this was actually, of the mediocres, this is one of the best ones I read, and it deals with kind of this witchery thing, this kind of, it feels a little bit like if you watch the movie The Village by M. Night Shyamalan, It's like that, but with witches. And I really liked that kind of twist to it, even though it's not the village, but it gives you those vibes. And I thought it was very interesting. I thought this whole kind of concept of once you go into this forest, you know, you're not really sure what's real, what's not. And once you get back, you're still trying to figure it out with the people you were in there with, and the whole concept of the devil and how this works, and all the sacrificing of these boys. And there's, and very LGBT, there's actually kind of a polyamorous relationship, which you don't see a lot. And I really liked how they portrayed it. So I thought this was a good surprise. It wasn't like the best thing I ever read. There was a few moments where I just kind of lost what I was listening to, but overall, this was a good surprise. And I think if I read it fully here, it would have been an even higher rating. Next up, we continued with Straight on Till Morning by Liz Braswell. This is one of the twisted tales. It is the twisted tale of Peter Pan. The concept is, what if Wendy first traveled to Neverland with Captain Hook instead of Peter Pan? So it takes on the concept that Peter Pan losing his shadow in the Darling nursery and doesn't come get it because Tink tells him it's not there when it is. So Wendy holds on to that shadow for several years, and now she's 16, and her parents are threatening to either marry her off or send her to Scotland to be a nanny, and she's not into it because she likes to write. She's very in her head and is really great, but her parents, of course, don't understand her. Her brothers are in school, so she decides to bargain her way to Neverland with Captain Hook, and shenanigans ensue. I really like that Peter Pan is not a big character in it, and that because Wendy is a little bit more grown up, she sees how stupid and annoying and bad Peter Pan is, because I don't like Peter Pan. I'm sorry. He is an egotistical shit, and I don't like him. I love the old Mary Martin, and well, Julie Andrews I think was the first one, but I love the Mary Martin version musical that you see. You can watch it on YouTube. It's the best one. They redid it a while back with Christopher Walken as Hook, and that was a little bit of a disaster show. But it's really fun, and I liked this version better because you see more of Wendy taking, you know, more independence, and her developing a friendship with Tink is great. So we get more female empowerment and females empowering females. There is no Tiger Lily in this, and I was kind of surprised but also kind of grateful because it is very racist in the story itself. I mean, it's not a great thing, and I'm kind of glad they did not include that, but also at the same time it would have been cool to see a more accurate portrayal of Native Americans in Neverland instead of these stereotypical ones. But either way, it was still fun to see Wendy and Tink's relationship grow, and Wendy kind of realizing her hero isn't as great as she thought he was, and also just more complication. I thought there was actually going to be more happening with some of the other characters in this in relation with Wendy, and I thought there might have been something later, because there is a pirate who's very nice and kind of gentlemanly towards her and helps her a lot, and he doesn't want to be there, and I thought maybe we'd see him at the end back in London, like maybe he finally got out of being a pirate. But that doesn't happen, and I was a little disappointed by that, but otherwise, this was still fun. I'm really enjoying the Twisted Tales. I'm reading another one right now, and it's great. Next mediocre-ish book is The Starlit Wood by many, many authors. It's edited by Dominic Parisian, but it features Shauna McGuire, Jeffrey Ford, Naomi Novik, Aliette de Bodard, Marjorie Liu, Garth Nix, Kathryn M. Valenti, and more, as it says there. I have to kind of remember whose stories I like the best. The good news in this, Naomi Novik books, her short story in this, because these are all basically retellings of fairy tales. I thought they were all going to be original fairy tales. They're not. But Naomi Novik's one is Spinning Silver. So it's her short story version of the book that I've already read. And so that was really nice and fun to see the beginnings of that book and how she changed certain things with it. I really liked it. Other ones that I liked. There were some of these that I just did not care about, and some that I really liked. Oh, Charlie Jane Anders was in this, and she did the Super Ultra Duchess of Fedora Forest, and which is a take on The Mouse, the Bird, and the Sausage, which is a fairy tale I had never actually heard of, but is a real fairy tale. And this was so fun. I loved that short story, which is really sad considering what's going to happen later in this video. Seasons of Glass and Iron by Amal El Motar. It was a take on two things, Glass Mountain and the Black Bull of Norway was really great. Bad Girl, the Dead Man, and the Wheel of Fortune by Kathryn and Valenti was also really, really good. It's a tale on the girl with no hands, which is one I don't know. Penny for a Match Mister, which is based on The Little Match Girl, is by Garth Nix. That one I really, really liked. It was very good. Oh, The Other Thea by Theodora Goss. That was great. That was a really good one to read during Halloween time because it feels very Worst Witch to me, and I really, really like that one. Those were probably my favorite ones of this. There were some that I really didn't like and some that were just kind of bland in my opinion, but it's a really nice collection of, they call it new fairy tales, but it's a lot of retellings, very interesting takes on them. So I do recommend grabbing this book if you like a lot of short stories and if you like retellings of all kinds of fairy tales, not just Grimm, but multiple different ones of fairy tales and fables. Oh, I didn't include this in the classics roundup because it wasn't that thing. Anyway, this is another classic, but it's Handmaid's Tale, and I also read the Testaments, so I'm keeping them kind of together. Handmaid's Tale, I enjoy the series of it, and I thought this was a very interesting, it's not an interesting take, it's the original copy, oh my god, cute. But I really enjoyed this. I thought the prose was very interesting. It was written in a very different style than I'm used to, so it took me a bit to get through it, but overall, I really, really liked it. I see the differences that the show made, and honestly, and I'm so sorry, everybody out there, but I think the show does a better job with this book. Granted, this was written in the 80s, and the show has upgraded it. It's much more diverse, but there are a lot of changes, especially with certain characters that we see, like the character of Janine. In this book, Janine's baby dies. They don't do that in the show. They make it last a lot longer, and they intertwine it with Janine's life a lot more. It's more about the colonies and stuff. There's more expansion on like Offred and Nick's relationship. I didn't really feel any of that in this with Nick and Offred. I didn't feel that connection that you get from the show. And it's not that important because this is not a romance. This is speculative fiction and dystopian. So it's interesting how this narrative is and how it got interpreted onto screen. I still enjoyed it on its own, but I definitely like the show better. I'm sorry. Because of that, I really enjoyed the Testaments. This one actually incorporates a lot of the plot lines that we see in the show, like Baby Nicole and grown up Baby Nicole and stuff. And the audiobook actually has Ann Dowd, who plays Aunt Lydia, in it, and she's reading it, and that just made it a little bit more immersive because, you know, you can really hear it in her. I thought they did a really good job with the other voice actresses and actors in it. That just made this whole world work very well because you see both sides of the story with Gilead still existing later on in life. I kind of was annoyed with the fact that Offred or June isn't really featured in this and the way that the girls ended up growing up, because the show really gives you that idea that June is going to get Hannah out, and this says that she doesn't, basically, and that's disappointing. Granted, the show can do whatever it wants because it doesn't have to do this, but if it goes further into how this is, then it's going to be a little disappointing. But overall, I thought it was very good. It's a good tale of, you know, reunion and of no matter what you do, no matter how much you indoctrinate women into believing they shouldn't read, they should marry, they should just be subservient, that even a girl who is grown up and been brainwashed can understand that this isn't right and that we should be able to do these things. So there's always that inner strength of women present in this, no matter what they go through, and I really enjoyed that message. The last kind of in-betweeny book, it was very good, but I knew I wasn't going to like it as much as the first book, and that is Legendary by Stephanie Garber. This is the sequel to Caraval, and Caraval I absolutely loved. Legendary, though, however, features the main character of Tella, who I really didn't like in the first book, and I still don't really care about her. She seems like such a stereotypical youngest daughter, and as a youngest daughter, I get offended by that, in which she's like the wild child who sleeps around and does drugs and well, doesn't do drugs, but drinks a lot and does the things that she's really not supposed to do, even when her sister tells her, and she's still lying to her sister. She's keeping it out, you know, from the truth, even though after everything they went through in Caraval, you would think she'd be a little bit more open about it. The way that this story goes is just, I kind of hated the twist. The twist that happens with who Legend is really kind of upset me, because it was like, I think it was guessed in the first book, and they were like, no, it's definitely not that. And then here in this one, they're like, yes, it is. And I'm not sure I like that kind of reveal to it. I was really hoping it was someone else. In particular, I had my own theories. I don't know. Maybe it's still fake. Maybe it's really not this person. But we'll have to see in finale whenever that drops in my Libby account. But I hope to finish this whole trilogy this year. We'll see what happens. But while I still enjoyed it, it was still a very intoxicating world. It was still a very intricate, different, it still stood out on its own. It wasn't like a repeat of the first book. It was its own story. It was very different from Caraval, but I still like Caraval more. Let's talk about the disappointments. I'll get through these pretty quickly. First off, I have a trilogy, and I didn't even finish this trilogy because I don't like this. And that is the Queen of Hearts trilogy by Colleen Oakes. And I read the first 2 books. I skimmed the third one just to see, like, is this going where I think it's going? And yes, it is, and I hate it. But this is, you know, when you have a villain origin story, especially a female villain, what's the one thing I hate? Go back to that video where I talk about tropes that I super duper hate and compare them and stuff. Because when you have a female villain whose whole reason for being a villain is because she has unrequited love for a stupid man who loves someone else that's also, like, just loves her because she's, like, just pretty or whatever. There was no actual development of that behind the scenes, and it frustrated me a lot. It frustrated me. Like, the first book was interesting, but you could already feel that this romance was not going to go well, and this was going to be her tipping point. And it is. And I hate that. I hate it a lot. And I didn't like the twists in it because I skimmed through this to see where it was going, and I saw where it was going, and I saw those reveals and stuff. And the fact, in the end of it as well, she still forces him into the relationship. She forces him, sorry, spoilers, but she forces him to still marry her after she has killed the woman he loves. Like, are you kidding me? You still have, and he's never gonna love her. He's never gonna do anything like this. It's not gonna happen, girl. Get over it. It's gross. It's bad. I don't like it. I did not like this. The other one I am very, very sad about, and I'm very sad I was disappointed with this, but that is Charlie Jane Anders, The City in the Middle of the Night. And I was so looking forward to this book because I loved Charlie Jane Anders. I loved All the Birds in the Sky. I loved her short story in Starlight Wood. This was so disappointing. It's a sci-fi book on a planet that's like perpetually in night on one side and not on the other. And this girl gets in trouble. She saves her stupid friend's ass because her stupid friend thinks she can get away with anything and steals some like money vouchers or something. And she says they're hers. And instead of like giving her a slap on the wrist, they throw her into the evil night where these things are called crocodiles, these big monster things. And she befriends the monsters and finds out they're not actually called that. They're actually called the Gellet. And they're, you know, sentient beings that build and stuff, but everyone else thinks that they're a basic monster. So she survives, and I thought it was going to be a lot different than what it turned out to be. But she kept going back to her shitty friend, who was the absolute worst, who literally uses her traumatic story as small talk at a party. And granted, our main character is like, that is not cool, never do that again. But she still is awful the entire time. And like, she's in love with her best friend, but as soon as her best friend realizes that, she freaks out and, you know, does the whole like, I'm not a lesbian freak out on her. And how, you know, how dare you fall in love with me? And she's just a trash human being. And the amount of times that she goes back for her best friend and tries to fix things or with her, it always ends poorly. And the ending of this book, where is it? Where is the ending? This is not a series. This is a standalone. Where is the ending? I'm very confused by this ending because there's still a lot left over there. And we kind of get a Binti moment here where our main character she evolves into something else, but there's no resolution between her and her friend, which is what you think the story's supposed to be. But it's not. And I guess you could say it's like, you know, it's the resolution of herself and claiming her own independence and being what she wants. But there's still so much left that you're kind of like, where's the rest of it? How is she actually going to defeat the villain, the now villain? And it had left me with so much disappointment, and I'm disappointed. I'm sad about it, and I wish I enjoyed it more, but I didn't. You should have been better. But at least it was only those books that were disappointing. The rest were either decent or extremely good. First off, we've got The Kingdom of Bach by Marie Lu. This is historical fiction, very light fiction, based on a lot of truth. And this is about Mozart and his sister. And there's so much you don't realize is true about this story until you get to the end of it and you see about the book and stuff, and you get told how this came to be. Like, Marie Lu has been writing this for like a decade, and you know, Mozart's actual sister was an actual prodigy on piano and in composition, but because she's a woman, she didn't get the same fame. She wasn't allowed to have that. And The Kingdom of Bach is a little kind of fairyland that Mozart and his sister did actually create. So why couldn't the whole story actually just be truth that Marie Lu was waiting to release on us, okay? It deals with her always wanting to be famous, to get the recognition she deserves, even just from her father, who is absolute garbage. They deal with the whole smallpox epidemic in this, and all 4 family members, mom, dad, brother, and sister, are all staying in this house together, but dad chooses to take Mozart out and leave the women behind. And that was just heart-wrenching. There was so much of her anger towards her dad that I related with really hard, which is sad to say, but there was a lot that I wholeheartedly went, oh, that's me. And I loved this. Highly recommend this. The audiobook is amazing for this as well, but I love my Owl Crate version because it is so shiny. Definitely pick this up. Next up, we have Circe by Madeline Miller. I finally got to read Circe. I've owned it for like, what, 3 years now? And I finally have it. And it was on my list for read last year and I didn't get to it, but I finally have gotten to it. And I'm so mad it took me so long because I loved this. I loved the story of Circe. I thought this was going to go a really bad way because she starts out, and I don't like her as she starts out, because Circe is weak. She is, you know, kind of sad and depressing in the beginning because she hasn't come into her own yet. She really comes into her own with her witchcraft, even with all of the lovers that she takes and the island that she lives on and all the girls that she ends up taking in and training. And she's just such an interesting, independent woman. And it's really interesting to hear about, from her perspective, all these other Greek myths that are way more famous than her. And to see it from her perspective and how it went around the world, like with the, you know, the Trojan War and stuff, like it's a footnote in this, which is crazy because it's something that you hear a lot about and you get a lot of movies for it, you get a lot of talk about it, but so much that happens, like the Minotaur is in this, and I was like, I didn't know Minotaur, because that's in one of my books that I'm writing, and I was really happy to see all of this stuff with it. It's great, and I really, really need to dig into Song of Achilles because it's just, I love the writing in this. I just loved it. I loved it a lot. You should read it. It's good. The hype is real, people. And lastly, probably my favorite book this month, of course, had nothing to do with classics or anything, is Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. I cannot wait to read Muse of Nightmares. I'm waiting. I just have to get through a couple other books and then I can read it. And this was so good. I do not know how to explain it to you, though. It's like a high fantasy, sort of, where this character, Strange, Laszlo Strange, doesn't actually have a real name because Strange is like what orphans get named here. He's a librarian and they're looked down upon in his culture. The alchemists are the ones that get everything because they're searching to make gold, and gold is everything. But there is the not mythical, but not really well-known town called Weep. Well, people know of it, but nobody's been to it. It's kind of a legend, and it's called Weep because you can't actually remember the name. Once you learn the name, you immediately forget it. And Laszlo Strange learns the name and immediately forgets it, and it's his whole driving point in life to learn everything he can about Weep. He learns how to speak the language, and when the god killer comes to their town, he begs to go back with them because they have a problem in Weep, and they need people to help solve it. And so all the best and brightest get to come, and Laszlo begs to come along and finally gets to, and they go. And then at the same time, there are the stories of the God Spawn happening. And the God Spawn are such interesting characters. I love it. We have the Muse of Nightmares herself, and she can kind of go into people's dreams with these moths. It's just aesthetically so cool. They all have blue skin, and she's just this vibrant character that I absolutely love. There's multiple characters. The scariest one of them is a child, and she has like all these temper tantrums, but she's terrifying. She can control the dead, which you think is like, well, that's useless. It's not. It's amazing. And it's just this beautiful story because the two of them, she meets him in a dream, and they form this bond and connection and fall in love that way. And it's such a beautiful story, both in their individual stories and in their romance together. The prose is so good. The twist ending is really great. And I need to read the second one. I'm so scared it's going to crush my heart into pieces, but I am a huge fan of this. If you have not read Strange the Dreamer, guys, it looks big. I poured through this one. It was so good. All right, there you go. I couldn't stop talking about books. Yay! What books did you guys read in the month of August? Did you read any classics? Have you read any of the classics that I read? Which are your favorites? Do you agree with me about Persuasion and Jane Eyre? Because yikes. Also Phantom. Yikes. Leave your comments down below, and guys, go ahead and check out my Ko-fi page if you want to support me as a content creator. I super appreciate it. I need to work on that page more though, because I was supposed to set up my shop there like months ago and I still haven't done that, so coming soon, maybe. But anyways, you can reach me down in the comments below or on Facebook, Tumblr, Twitter, and I'll see you next time, cuties. Bye! Pat the butt. Pat the butt. Hey, baby. Yes. Okay, you rub against that cardboard. Hi! Did you just fall into a box? Good job. And my bag of fake flowers. Love it. Good job, Chris.